now available in paperback and e-readers. Spellbound, a darker shade of black. Get your copy today at your favorite online bookseller.
Sunday night at the Oscars, we saw Spike Lee receive the greatest N-word moment in history. Now, Professor Black Truth in his videos often talks about how white supremacy often likes to play the long joke. And we saw an example of that long joke played on Spike Lee at the Oscars, where your Spike Lee actually thought for a minute there he had arrived. He thought he was going to get white acceptance, and he thought he was going to get white approval. And your Spike Lee, he thought this was going to happen because his film, BlacKkKlansman, was nominated for several Oscars, including Best Picture and Best Director. And your Spike didn't understand white supremacy, nor did he understand the whole concept of the long joke. Now, as a comedy writer, I understand what I call the time release gag. And the time release gag is like this. They will set up a mark in the beginning, they will gas the guy's head up for a long time, and then eventually these guys are thinking that things are going swimming until they hit the moment of the punchline. And when they hit the moment of the punchline, that's where your white supremacists go out here and hit you straight in the gut and then enjoy a laugh at your expense. And what happened to Spike Lee was a time release gag presented to black people on screen. Now, we all know that Spike Lee was one of the great filmmakers of the 20th century, producing brilliant films like Do the Right Thing, like School Days, like Malcolm X, and many other classic black films which feature beautiful cinematography, great storytelling, great acting, and brilliant writing. But unfortunately, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has never shown Spike Lee the respect for his talent and ability as a filmmaker, the same way they have given validation and approval to people like Roman Polanski in the past. No, when it comes down to Spike Lee, they have shown little respect for him, even though in 1989 he produced one of the greatest films of all time, Do the Right Thing, a film that made a powerful commentary on the codependent relationship between blacks and whites, and a powerful commentary on the dysfunctional nature of blacks and whites and race relations here in America. That film, in and of itself, belongs in the Library of Congress and is a powerful film that actually tells powerful truths about race, but Hollywood would never give Spike the recognition he deserved 30 years ago. Instead, they decided to play it safe and play on an old period race drama, Driving Miss Daisy. They gave that film the Best Picture of the year, and they did that because they wanted to continue pushing their white supremacist narrative, because the only people who they see as valuable in their world are shuffling Negroes, slaves, mammies, big black brutes, and anyone who fits within stereotypes that fit their narrative. But the time release gag they were playing on Spike Lee, this was something that was incredibly cruel. Again, BlacKkKlansman was nominated for Best Screenplay, Adapted Screenplay, Best Picture, and Best Director. And Spike thought he was going to take home one of the major awards, especially the Best Picture and Best Director, because both of those would cement him in American history as one of the all-time great filmmakers in history, like your Billy Wilder and like Steven Spielberg and James Cameron. He would be cemented in that Hall of Fame of great directors, and he would be an icon to many generations of black people coming after us. So your Spike thought that this would be white people finally giving him that validation and approval. He thought that things were going to go that way, especially after he was given the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay, because he thought that this would be a precursor to a night where he was finally going to be acknowledged for his talent and his gift as a filmmaker. But what he didn't understand with white supremacists like those at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, is that, again, it's a long game, and they, again, play time release gags on Negroes. Now, the time release gag here was they gave him one Oscar for the Best Adapted Screenplay, and they got your Spike Lee's hopes up because we saw him lighting up on that screen, smiling, and he was buying into the whole white validation and white approval game. And that was shown in the statement that he made trying to rally black people to go out here and vote against Donald Trump in 2020. It showed that he had actually bought into all of the rhetoric and all of the game that was being played on him. He didn't understand that there was an Oscar okey doke going on, because he just didn't understand the big picture. He was too close up and too caught up in his feelings about white people finally giving him some validation and approval after over 30 years of snubbing him, that he couldn't see that these white people were doing what they usually do, setting a black man up so they can get a huge laugh at his expense. And again, your Spike was sitting there thinking that these people were his friends. He thought he was finally going to be moving on. He finally thought he was going to get his big break. And he finally thought he was going to be going on to levels of greatness in American history. But we saw how cruel white supremacists could be when, as the night went on, and the announcement for Best Picture came along. And with that announcement of Best Picture of Green Book, that's where we started to see the punchline delivered right to Spike Lee's gut and right to Spike Lee's face in the form of a hard left and a hard right from those people in Hollywood. Now, what's really funny about this whole situation, what's really sad, is that your Spike Lee didn't see what was going to happen to him. He thought that these white people loved him. He thought these people cared about him. But in actuality, they just were expressing their contempt for him in a passive-aggressive fashion. Passively, they let him have a consolation prize Oscar for the Best Adapted Screenplay. Then aggressively, they then hit the 1-2 punch at him, where they denied him the Best Director Oscar and then the Best Picture Oscar. And then they, in the ultimate insult to injury, they gave it to a film, Green Book, which was the exact same film that Do the Right Thing lost the Oscar to 30 years ago. Because Green Book was basically Driving Mr. Daisy, which featured one of these race dramas where we have the great white savior driving around the effeminate, closeted gay black man. And that film, again, was a complete insult to anyone who understood film, because Green Book was just another one of these movies that featured the great white savior who was going to come in, and he's going to drive this poor, downtrodden black man around to these spots during racism, the time of racism and Jim Crow. And what we get is another white man's view of racism and Jim Crow, because even the family that created the Green Book themselves are deeply disgusted with this movie and the presentation of, the Green Book and the history of the Green Book, because all they did was, again, what these white people do. They get the rights to material, and then they change the story to fit the narrative they feel comfortable with. But your Spike Lee, after getting hit in the gut with these punches, he wanted to leave because he was humiliated by the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences, but an usher stopped him from leaving before the ceremony could end. And again, that was all about humiliating Spike Lee. That was all about making him a complete joke. And that joke is one that many of these white supremacists are laughing at right now, because they figure they got Spike Lee very good with this really cruel joke, where they set your Spike Lee up to be this guy who was thinking that he was coming into this success, but in actuality, they were just setting him up for a huge punchline. And that punchline, again, was to say to Spike Lee that no matter how great a film you make, you will always still be an N-word to us, and your work will never have any value to us. And this is why black folks have to stop seeking out white validation, white approval, and stop seeking the attention of white people. Because when you do that, what you do is you give white people power, and they will use that power to try to destroy you because they have no respect for you, they have no regard for you, and they only want to see you, in many cases, as the butt of their jokes. So when I look at what happened to Spike Lee, that just showed me what happens when you keep chasing that carrot of white validation and white approval. And just like Lucy does with Charlie Brown in the football, she's never going to let you kick the football. All she's going to do is yank it right away, and that's how they maintain power over you. So Spike learned the hardest lesson about racism on Oscar night 2019, a night that was supposed to be all about so-called diversity, but we all saw at the end of the night who the real racists were. And your Spike probably right now is thinking twice about the whole statement he made about your Donald Trump, where he sat there and talked about how we need to go rally to get Donald Trump out of office, when in actuality, look at many of the people who were non-Trump supporters in that awards ceremony. They were all saying how much they hated Donald Trump, but it's clear they have a greater hatred and contempt for black people, and they expressed that hatred and contempt for black people, and that's one of the core reasons why black people need to hold their vote in 2019, and they need to hold their vote in 2020, because if this is the type of contempt that both parties are showing us, then we need to stop making political statements talking about how we need to get rid of Trump, because it's clear that America will not be great for us with either party, so we need to sit this one out because they're not promising us anything in the terms of tangibles. And that's the hard lesson that Spike Lee learned at that Oscars 2019, was that all he did was rally to get rid of Trump, not understanding that if they're not promising you tangibles, then you need to not go out here and rally to get rid of a president when the other side is not offering you anything of value. When I look at what happened to Spike Lee at the Oscars, it thoroughly disgusts me, because this man is truly a master of his craft, and sadly, the only way he's going to see himself being appreciated is from the black community, and it's the black community that was the one that elevated him, but he doesn't see the value that black people are giving him. Instead, he continues to seek white validation and white approval, and when you do that, again, you give away your power and you prevent yourself from actualizing your potential as a craftsperson. As a craftsperson myself, as a novelist and a screenwriter and aspiring comic book writer, my whole thing is I don't look for white validation and white approval, because I know about the value of black and the value of being black, and I see a great value in blackness, and so that's why I don't go out here looking for the approval of others. So that's a lesson that Spike needs to take to heart, because the longer you seek approval of others, that's what got black people in trouble back in the 60s with the civil rights movement. So many of our black people, they stopped fighting for civil rights and started fighting for social acceptance from white people. And because they fought for social acceptance, that's why the black community never actualized its potential and became the great community it could have been. If Spike had stayed with the black community, maybe we could have had our own Oscars. We could have turned something like the Image Awards or one of these other awards into a award of higher value, a reward that people would have gotten on merit, and that would have been something that could have been considered our high measure of quality and how we measure our films by our standard. And maybe if we had started seeing value in ourselves, we could take stuff like the Oscars and throw it into the trash where it belongs. If you'd like to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon by clicking the link in the description box. And if you want to try some of my SJS Direct publications, you may do so by clicking the link to Amazon.com. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe.